All right, welcome everybody back to the Rice Report, our conversation series. It just gets better. It just seems like every couple of weeks we just come across some gems of conversations that are really timely in world events. And with the recent conversation that Tucker's had about 9/11 a couple of days ago, he made a very strong reference to Lieutenant Colonel Tony Shaffer, who many of you may remember. Most of my viewers out there are older. We will remember 9/11. Those of you who are under 30 years old who weren't around at the time or children. Tony is the original 9/11 whistleblower, and I use that term loosely. Whistleblowers are generally thought of in two different ways. Lieutenant Colonel Schaefer came with intelligence, with data. He went to the government, explained what was happening. A little bit on his background: he is an Army Reserve lieutenant colonel, part of Operation Dark. I wrote a book called Operation Darkheart. And I ordered it. I haven't read it. I ordered it yesterday on Amazon. But he identified Muhammad Atta through the DIA data mining system, and he was part of Project Able Danger. I'm not going to explain it too much, but Kurt Weldon kind of threw his name out there. We're going to have Kurt on here as well next week. But Lieutenant Colonel Schaefer, thank you so much for being here. I think that your story is one that needs to be told over and over again. It's been a few years. It's kind of back in the spotlight, as it should be. 9/11 to date is the largest disaster in U.S. history, the largest loss of life on a single day in U.S. history. There are so many questions. 9/11, I'll give you my 9/11. I was trading at the time. I was in the Chicago Board of Trade, and we were in fear that our building was next because it was the next logical financial network or building heading west. Obviously, it didn't happen. The entire city shut down. I felt like in the time, I couldn't explain it, but I felt like this was a test of national security, of how citizens would respond. I'm a civilian. I make no bones about that. From a military perspective, Lieutenant Colonel, thank you for coming. I am so excited to have this conversation, and you have so much to share. So maybe run us through and give us a recap. I know it's probably hard because you've been. I'm just looking at the information here. You were stripped of your security clearance. You were given an indefinite unpaid suspension for telling the truth. So if you wondered how we got here, it probably started with guys like Tony Shaffer telling the truth back in 2001 or 1999 is actually when it began. Give us a rundown of that whole, like recap that for the audience out there, if you could.
Sure. Well, Eric, thank you for having me on. And it's interesting. I'm still a public figure and I do a lot of stuff. I was the national security advisor to the Trump 2020 campaign. There are people who don't know the history of what we're about to talk about because it's so remote to them. It's like they have I posted stuff the other day on this, like, oh, you did that? It's like, yeah, it's a long time ago for some people. But with that said, yeah, to a lot of us, it was only yesterday, and in many ways, just the way you started this is the way I would like to start it. When 9/11 happened, the first thing I did is I told all of my team, and I was running a task force named Stratus Ivy. It was a special mission task force, black mission special operation task force that was supporting Able Danger. I told everybody, I don't care where you go, get out of all government buildings. You don't know what's coming next. Just go, just get out. And I got my team evacuated 3 hours before DIA, Defense Intelligence, decided, oh yeah, we should evacuate and get everybody out of buildings. So the government was in many ways slow to respond, but in other ways responded badly. For example, I would argue to tell this story, I got to go a little bit forward after 9/11. The response to 9/11 was peculiar. And remember, you were there. You said you went through it. Remember how within 48 hours we had the full list of hijackers and all their information.
Yep.
How does that happen?
Right.
So it's like I immediately okay, we were tracking these guys, but that's like a list even more detailed than what we had. And so that was the first thing. Secondly, they go about trying to invoke or put together the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act, which I would argue does not do anything to improve our ability to target foreign sources. So that's another, I think, outgrowth that was not required. And then the AUMF, the Authorized Use of Military Force. We still, 25 years later, are using the authorized use of military force, even though we killed bin Laden 12 years ago and the war should have been over then. So my point to you, Eric, is this thing was bigger than Al-Qaeda and terrorists. Now, and I think that's part of why it's so important we go back to the beginning to find out how this happened. Kurt Weldon and I are friends. I admire Kurt. Kurt had the courage to do some things that others did not. And to your point, I really didn't, I don't really consider myself a whistleblower. I just kind of wandered into this because after I did my tour in Afghanistan and I did a book, Operation Dark Heart, which I think people are aware of. Operation, there it is. This covers my time in Afghanistan after 9/11 in 2003 and 2004. Now, the reason I'm bringing it up before I go to Able Danger is because during this deployment, while I was at Bagram, I talked to a guy named Dr. Philip Zelikow. Zelikow, in my judgment, is the guy who is supposed to cover up and hide, not figure out and fact find the 9/11 issues. He was the chief of staff of the 9/11 Commission. And so I met with Zelikow at Bagram in September of 2003. And I disclosed to him, I made my first of several protected disclosures. And you're going to talk to Louis Gohmert. Louis Gohmert, I've made similar disclosures to Louis. And within the context of the events then, I was told by Zelikow, when you get back to the States, I need to talk to you because the information you provided me today is very, very important, which had to do with the fact that we had a pre-existing operation and a campaign plan known as Able Danger. Able Danger, I know this is a long way to get to it, Eric, but I'm finally getting there.
No, you're great.
Able Danger was the pre-9/11 operational plan created by General Hugh Shelton, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, in 1999. And Hugh Shelton was responding to President Clinton's concerns over the embassy bombings in Africa. Basically, Al Qaeda was a growing threat. We recognized it as a growing threat. And Hugh Shelton got the tasking to do something about it. Well, his idea was putting together an offensive operation that was designed to go after Al Qaeda in detail, to map the organization, determine capabilities we should use from Special Operations Command to go attack it, and do it in advance of an attack. That is to say, before they could hit us, to go after them. He assigned this operations plan, I used to have a copy of it, to General Pete Schoonmaker, the commander of Special Operations Command. And what was unique about this, Eric, this was the first time in the history of Special Operations Command that they were the supported sync. That is to say, they were the command that had the lead to go after this target globally. In the past, it was always a regional sync, like Central Command, European Command, Pacific Command. They were subordinated for the first time to SOCOM on this issue. So that's what I disclosed to Zelikow. And I said, oh, by the way, we had used data mining as the method of targeting, because at the time, nobody understood data mining. How do you map an organization that has no boundaries or borders? Well, we tried several methods. We figured out that data mining was the way to go. And we did some very sophisticated things with data. Plus, we did something that people got really upset with. We were collecting on mosques all over the world. We had people who were basically tracking the comings and goings in mosques. So we did a combination of old-fashioned research and spying with the new technology of data mining, put it all together to establish a mosaic of global activities of Al Qaeda. That's it. That's how we did it. And this became very controversial for a number of reasons you could probably imagine.
Sure.
And then part two was my mission, which I still can't talk about. We've asked the Pentagon to consider declassifying my role. And by the way, you mentioned I'm a reserve lieutenant colonel. That was my cover. I mean, I'm now a retired lieutenant colonel, but the use of it going forward, like in Afghanistan, it was my cover. I was undercover in an alias, which is disclosed in the book. So,
what was the alias?
My alias, Chris Stryker, which is a great porn star name, apparently, according to the people I saw. Anyway,
yeah, that's grade A. That's grade A material.
I know. Lieutenant. Anyway, Chris Stryker, Lieutenant Colonel Chris Stryker. Yeah, talk about a comic book name. It's like something from Battlestar Galactica, right? So
yeah, we're both big fans.
Yeah. So back to so I make this disclosure and I say, oh, by the way, I disclosed the two things I can't talk about even now publicly regarding the purpose of Able Danger. So these things are all taken by Zillicow, and he takes them back. And next thing you know, I come back to the States. I'm back for about 8 weeks. I'm back for 2 months because I have to go back to Afghanistan for a second tour. And I call up Zelikow's staff and it's like, yeah, we know who you are. We'll have you come in next week. And this is like January of 2004.
So 3 years
Week
after
goes,
the fact.
yeah, week after I called in, I call again. It's like, yeah, we don't need to see you. We have all we need on Able Danger. What?
How? Yeah. How?
Yeah. So that's where it's like I scratch my head. It's like, okay. And we came to find later, and that's probably a story for another day, that and I know the person who brought the data over to them. And she later told me that, yeah, we gave them virtually nothing of Able Danger. We gave them some background documents that amounted to an acknowledgement that it existed, and
Hmm.
we were told to not share anything else. So that's where the whole cover up starts. And
Who
during my
who told
second
them not
tour,
to share anything else?
we don't know. We don't know. We
Ah,
just know that the Pentagon shared a certain amount, and they didn't. The Pentagon and 9/11 Commission basically just said we don't want to talk about this. Both sides said we don't want to talk about
wow.
it. And so yeah, so that's where one of the mysteries starts. And then so I go to my second tour to Afghanistan, and I get called back early. It's like you need to come back now, and that's documented in Darkheart. The last chapter of Darkheart is me being recalled back early and having my clearance suspended for like for like bullshit reasons they drummed up. And
What were the
it would
reasons? You got
take.
to give us the reasons.
Oh, okay, sure. So the three reasons were undue award of the Defense Meritorious Service Medal, and it's like it was for Able Danger, by the way. It's like, and their conclusion was, well, you somehow influenced the general to approve it. Eric, to this day, I've never met the general who approved it. I've never even talked to the man, not once. I swear to God, it's like, oh, you somehow influenced him. It's like I've never met the man, and to this day,
Wow.
I've never. The guy was name was General Dayton, and I never met him, and I've to this day I've never met him, and how I influenced him is beyond me. I guess I used some sort of a Vulcan mind trick or something. I can only imagine. Uh,
That
the
was another top secret project you were using.
Yeah, the illegal use of a government cell phone that I racked up the immense amount. You ready for the amount that they're accusing me of fraud for? You ready?
Yes.
$67.67.
That's heinous. That's heinous,
And
Colonel.
they had to get to that amount by the fact that on weekends and holidays I would forward my government phone to my personal phone, so I only had to carry one phone. It racked up. It cost the government 65 cents per forwarded call. I swear to God, you can't make this up. And that
$67.
was $67 over 2 years. They added it all up.
Wow. $67
Yeah,
and a medal you influenced from a guy you've never met. So these are already
yeah.
two ridiculous claims.
And then I went to Fort Dix, New Jersey, to attend Command and General Staff College, which was a required school for promotion to lieutenant colonel, and I claimed mileage for it. It's like, yeah. Oh, well, you commingled. It's like, yeah, I could. Well, you used the wrong form. They'd reject it. They reject it and tell me to use it. No, no, no. They purposely did not reject it. They approved it and then said, "Oh, you did it. You did it illegally." And you know what the amount of that was? That fraud, $120 in mileage and tolls.
You can't even buy a steak dinner for those two. That's what,
So
$187
they
right there.
spent, Eric. They spent over $1.5 million to figure out these three items of wrongdoing. Just saying.
Wow. So what were they at this point in time? Had you been deposed? Had you been able to?
No, no, no. We didn't know. We didn't connect my Able Danger disclosure to this behavior, and so it's like I'm suspended. I go to work at Home Depot in Springfield, Virginia, and have a great time because I'm suspended It's like, I just go to home. So I was working at Home Depot doing stuff. Next thing you know, I get a call from one of the Able Danger members, Scott Philpott. And Scott says, "Hey, what are you doing?" It's like, "I'm working at Home Depot." It's like, "Yeah, we heard about what happened. We don't care. You need to come work for the Navy." So next thing
Nice.
you know, the Army at the senior level, Terry Ford, who was the deputy senior intelligence officer for the Army, all the Army, senior civilian for the Army intelligence. I call him up and it's like, "Hey, the Navy wants me." It's like, "Yeah, come on down." So I'm meeting in the Pentagon, got my Pentagon badge and everything. Even though my clearance is suspended, nobody buys it. Nobody acknowledges it. Like, "Yeah, we don't care." So next thing you know, the Army assigns me to the Navy to work in their internal think tank called Deep Blue. And so, sure. So the Navy and Army, they don't care about what DI is. As a matter of fact, DI gets wind that I'm in these meetings and they're all upset. "Why his clearance is suspended?" It's like, yeah, nobody cares. Nobody buys it. And so they were getting really upset. DI was. It's like, yeah, nobody cares. So next thing I know, uh, the Navy want to find funding to rebuild for a version of Able Danger for the Navy. Huh, that makes sense
Sure.
to me. I don't care. So the Navy has prohibition of Navy members going to talk to members of Congress without congressional liaison approval. So the Navy, Scott Philpott, being the bright guy, is like, "Hey, you're Army. They can't tell you
Smart.
no."
Yeah, that's smart.
So
You can do it.
so
Yeah.
yeah, so technically I didn't violate Navy regs. And since I wasn't going over to talk about Army issues regarding the Army didn't care. It's like, we don't care. We don't care if you go over. So next thing you know, I'm over talking to Congressman Kurt Weldon, the vice chair of House Armed Services. And so during this meeting, I'm laying out what the Navy wants to do. And, they know my background a little bit. And so during this meeting, Kurt Weldon says, "Well, Colonel Schaefer, I'm all for this, but why? What happened to the money we gave you last time? What happened to the Able Danger money?" And it's like, "Oh, that." So I go through and lay out everything I had talked to Zelikow about, to include finding two of the three cells which conducted the 9/11 attacks and finding Muhammad Atta. And Kurt is like, "What? Why didn't you tell the 9/11 Commission any of this?" Like, "I did." And Kurt looked at me and said, "There's no reference to it in the report." It's like, "Yeah, I know. I thought there was a classified annex." He's like, "Tony, there's no classified annex."
It's just being
So
buried.
yeah. So this is when I knew something was really wrong, because I just, I was doing my job. So next thing you know, his chief of staff, Russ Queso, calls over to Chris Kojum over at the 9/11 Discourse Project. It's kind of like their stay behind, the guys who, answer questions. So Chris Kojum gets called from Russ, and Russ says, "Hey, we've got someone here in the office that says that they briefed you on something called Able Danger. Have you ever heard of it?" And so Chris says, "Well, let me check into that and get back to you." So anyway, we're sitting and waiting. This is like a 3-hour meeting at Chris and Kurt Weldon's office, because they took this really seriously. And I'm sitting there just waiting. And so Russ Queso comes back in about 20 minutes later. And Russ Queso was a 6'5" linebacker who played football in college. And he looks white as a ghost. And I'll never forget, Russ walks in, he looks at Kurt and me, and Kurt says, "Well, what do they say?" He says, "Oh yeah, they heard of it." And Chris confirmed they heard of it, and it was a road that they did not want to go down, unquote.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, this is the only road to go down at this point. Like, if
It
there's
would
a
be the
road to
road
go
you'd want to
down,
go down if you
yes.
really wanted to get to the truth. Just saying. So that was the beginning of my odyssey as a whistleblower, because it's like, I had no idea. It's like, I'm just here.
You're
So
doing your job.
right after that meeting, this is one of the proudest moments of my Army career. So right after this meeting, I head back to the Pentagon. Before I even talk to the Navy, I call my Army boss is Terry Ford. And I said, "Hey, Terry, I was just on the Hill. The Navy sent me over." He says, "Yeah, I knew that." I said, "Well, they started asking some hard questions about Able Danger." And now Terry knew what Able Danger was, because he was the XO of General Hughes at Defense Intelligence Agency when I was working Able Danger. So Terry knew what I was doing, and he worked for the director who, Pat Hughes, God rest his soul, passed this year or last year, but he was aware of Able Danger. Terry Ford, the number 3 guy in Army intelligence, and I said, Terry, they asked me about Able Danger. What do you want me to do? Without hesitation, Terry said, Tony, I want you to do 2 things. Tell them what they want to know and tell them the truth.
Great.
Okay. And that's why, Eric, the Army protected me through the process because I did what they asked me to do. And so basically this became Army versus Defense Intelligence Agency, which is how the book ended up the way it was too. Army cleared it. DIA came after it. Just saying, there's been this push-pull for 20 years now going back because
Who
Army
was in
approved
charge
my
of DIA at that point?
At that point was Jacoby, who was a deep state guy. Just saying.
Of course.
Admiral Jacoby. So, so this became Army versus DIA from day one, pretty much from the time I was in combat, because DIA kept saying, well, we didn't give you permission to talk to the 9/11 Commission. It's like, you didn't have to. I was attached to an Army unit to the leadership targeting cell in Afghanistan. They gave me permission. So legal wise, DI has been upset. And that's why I testified, not as a GS-14 civilian, but as an Army lieutenant colonel, because the Army approved my testimony. Just saying. That's kind of the politics behind why I'm still known as Lieutenant Colonel Schaefer versus Mr. Schaefer. So
got it.
So anyway, that's
so
how
at this
that all
point,
happened.
so there's a push and pull. There is one side trying to get the data, the truth out, and another one trying to bury it in silence at this point within our ranks, between a military unit and an intelligence unit comprised of military personnel.
That's right.
Why is that happening? In you're going through this. This must be completely confusing to you. Like, what's going through your mind at that time?
Well, I was a specialist at running way off the books operations. You know, that is my specialty. It is what it is, and I had a great time doing it. I've done everything from being undercover as a stuntman to being undercover as a gray arms guy to running my own company. So I loved being a spy. It was fun. I'm not going to lie. It's like, it was great. So, and if you read my book, I did everything spies do, to include giving full body massages to hot females in combat. Just saying.
It's a tough gig. It's a tough gig.
Tough gig. Tough gig. Anyway, so I was often confronted with people not knowing what I was doing. And so Able Danger was no different. I'm convinced, Eric, that we weren't supposed to find what we found because nobody knew we existed. We were way off the books. And so because we were way off the books, we were given kind of a free hand to go look at whatever we wanted, however we wanted to do it. So when the pattern emerged of finding out that Al Qaeda was functioning globally to conduct operations here, our alarm bells went off. It's like, hey, this is important. We need to stop this. And I think that's what became controversial, that we started proposing, and I have to be careful because there's certain concepts that I still can't talk about, but we were considering options on how to get these guys directly. Just saying. That's all I can say about it at this point.
Sure.
But the idea here is that I'm convinced the way the reaction came, we weren't supposed to find what we found. That the 9/11 Commission was supposed to cover this up. They were hoping that none of our team would ever come forward. And when we came forward, they tried to dismiss us or degrade our ability to speak. You know, if you read the Able Danger IG report, I'm just a disgruntled lieutenant colonel reservist.
Yeah.
It's
of
like,
course.
no, yeah. I'm an operative with over 20 years of experience at that time. And they tried to oh yeah, no, he's just a lieutenant colonel who just happened to go undercover in alias in Afghanistan. You know, oh yeah, just another reservist using aliases. Yeah. That's how stupid it is. That's how stupid it was. But
Colonel Stryker. Like, Colonel Stryker.
Colonel Stryker. He didn't like his alias. He's upset about that. So, but my point being is that we weren't supposed to find what we did. So, and this is the other thing I want your audience to understand. We did this as a Title 10 operation. Title 10 is the easy way to remember. Title 10 is called TMA, Traditional Military Activities. Traditional military activities essentially can be summarized by anything George Washington did during his time running the Continental Army, we can still do today. And if you
Hmm.
remember, George Washington had his own spies. Just saying.
Yes. Yes, it did.
So we did this as a Title 10 op, which gives us a great deal of latitude, and we don't have to tell people. we don't, because it's black, you know. So
But can you? I have to ask.
yeah,
Can you?
well, we had to read people in. We had a list of a bigot list of people. You had to be read into it. It was noted. It was recorded, and you were limited to who you could talk to about it. You had to make sure someone else was read in before you could talk about details of the program. And we were very small, and because we were very small, not everybody on the team knew what everybody else was doing. It was very much compartmented.
Sure.
So, and that's why you're going to see, Eric, as we start talking about this again, when Tucker starts talking about it, you're going to see a mosaic. You're going to see how everything fit together and how people worked together and didn't quite know. I was unique because I had a lot of pieces. I was in the kind of in the center doing a number of things. So I got to see more than others on the team. But that's how it happened. That's how Able Danger was established and how it was run. So it was not a Title 50 intelligence op. Title 50 is intelligence operations. So that's why when you saw us have hearings, the primary hearings were in front of the Judiciary Committee in the Senate because of posse comitatus, because we were doing things domestically. That was a huge issue, which I still can't talk about in great detail, but it was pertinent. I'll just add that. The other two hearings were in front of the House Government Oversight and Reform because they used security clearances to retaliate against me and others, and then House Armed Services. Those are the three big committees
Hmm.
that had hearings, and then as much as they had the hearings, then you had Senate Intelligence do a report saying nothing to see here. It's
Yeah,
like,
I
yeah, you
remember
guys
that.
weren't involved, but you guys did the report to dismiss it. That's how wacky they were and how they did this. So I think, to your point, Eric, now's a good time to dust this all off, to get it all relooked, because the one thing we all want is accountability. And we think the best way to do that is by a new, unbiased team to do a full, real investigation of 9/11 and what happened before, after it, and the day of.
So you were kind of in this whole in the mosaic that you're talking about. You were kind of the rover. You had access to a little bit of everything,
Yeah,
or a lot of a lot.
pretty
So
much. That's a good description. I didn't describe it that way, but yeah, I think that's a good description of it. Yeah.
so you have to have a concept, an idea, and of course, being that you probably know more than most, which is fascinating. Being that you know more than most about this, do you have a conclusion in your mind? Because I personally don't think one group was behind 9/11. I think it was a coordinated effort of many different groups, and it's
I
obviously the biggest story in American history, and probably eh, there are probably more conspiracy theories about 9/11 than anything else, and I am one of those people. I don't even care who it is, or I just want to know the truth. I want to know.
Yeah,
I,
me
I
too.
lost two friends in Tower One. I mean, I want to know what the heck happened. Do you have a clue of that? And if you do, can you tell us what you think?
So my original belief was there was no way U.S. Officers, government politicians or other, who took the oath of office would ever do anything to damage the United States. Boy, oh boy, Eric, has my attitude about that changed over 20 years.
I
You,
bet.
you just look at Iraq, what we found after the fact there, and I talk about in my book. There was, there's some stuff. I was actually on the team overseeing some of the Iraq stuff, which you'll probably read and want to have questions about. Anyway,
Yes.
you look at that. You look at the pandemic. You look at the attempt by the left to undermine free speech. Man, I'm convinced that there are evil forces within our own government that would be willing to, basically, if they saw benefit, they would throw people under the bus and they would see Americans killed. As a matter of fact, I think they have materially been involved in the murder of Americans at this point. So
Absolutely.
my belief in what I believed in 2003 during 2004 2005 during my whistleblowing has changed dramatically. And I do believe that, based on what I've seen when they went after Trump with Crossfire Hurricane, or they did other things like that, there's no doubt that there were elements of our own government who at least were at least negligent. I'll be polite at this point, negligent,
Sure.
because I think FBI and CIA both had knowledge regarding these guys, and they didn't know about us. I think a lot of the CIA elements and FBI elements, even though we tried to warn them, we kept getting shut down by lawyers. I think there's definite
Wait.
prior knowledge.
You were trying to warn them ahead of time, which is a huge part of the story.
Yeah.
But they had lawyers coming after you personally or to your division?
Well, kind of personally, because they eventually got all of us fired or moved out. But a guy named Ken Brew, Lieutenant Commander Ken Brew, Navy lawyer, I think he got promoted later, was the guy who basically said that the 9/11, we had the big chart with a TA on it, and this happened in February of 1999, where I brought the chart down. We basically had land information warfare activity, LIWA, do a run. Basically, they had consolidated the data. We did a pattern analysis of Al Qaeda, and I've testified to this, and I've talked to the IG about it a number of times. There was a cluster, and then within the cluster of basically around the Brooklyn cell, they were affiliated by the Brooklyn cell, not by geographic location, but who they were talking to. And Ata's picture was there. Ken Brew made us, the Able Danger team, take any name of any individual that had a green card off the radar. Like, you can't look at those people;
What?
they're here legally. Yeah. It's like,
What?
what? Yeah. What? It's like, what? That's not.
Even if they
That's
were
not.
American citizens, you should be looking at them. Even if they're
Yes, because
full-blown citizens.
EO Executive Order Triple C3 says American citizens who are affiliated with terrorist organizations are lawful targets.
That's right.
So,
And so he's telling you if they have a green card, don't look into them?
That's right. And I have testified to this. We have testified in open and closed hearings about this. And there's never been any explanation other than he was responding to someone named Jamie Gorelick. Jamie Gorelick was a DOD attorney at the time, making sure that there was a quote unquote separation between law enforcement and intelligence sharing, the Gorelick memo. So this was front and center to the whole. And by the way, Gorelick ended up on the 9/11 Commission. Gee, I wonder why that happened.
Wow. So I know that there's I was one of these people until probably 2019. I was like, you know what? Maybe our government is a little bad, but generally has our best interest in mind. Since 2000, once you start opening books that are written in hard paper and not reading the internet, which is modified all the time, you start to realize that our government has some deep, dark secrets, and 9/11 probably is where the honeypot is most robust. And I don't know, right? I'm just a normal civilian looking from the outside. But what you're telling me right here is that the cover up began for 9/11 really in 1999. That's when they started. They had to have known. I mean, you testified, many other people testified that they had the intelligence to warn us of these events happening ahead of time and did nothing about it. God, this is just like a whole nother, you're an onion, Tony. Like every time you're speaking, a new layer in my brain opens up. So we obviously know who.
Yeah. Well, Eric,
Ahead,
this is what I'm saying. There's a mosaic here. People don't fully understand. It's like, and I've got this question a number of times. Why didn't you guys scream louder in 99, 2000 about the threat? Because this was one of 5 major operations my team was running. And the other targets were equally important. Just saying. I can't get into that, but I'm just saying this was not more important or less important than other targets we were taking on back then. Just saying. So,
Wow. So it kind of brings up the question, like, if they weren't going to do anything about it, why they even have you guys working on these operations?
well, that's the part of the mystery, because in January of 2001, all the options to include the capabilities that were ready to be used, that is to say, we gave Hugh Shelton, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, thought out options that matched target to capability to likelihood of success. And then right after that briefing, we were stood down. January 2001, we were stood down. We still to this day, Eric, don't know why we were stood down. We then went into like, why are we being stood down mode? They separated us. They started separating us physically. Like, I was pulled off my team was pulled off the operation. It was bizarre. It was like as soon as we were ready, they dismantled us.
And to pull these kind of strings to pull guys off of operations, this is not like low level people. These are high
Nope.
level operatives that are
Yep.
covering up before it even happened.
Yep.
So the obvious
Yeah.
result was you have 9/11, then you have the Patriot Act, which you brought up, which the Patriot Act, it is actually an attack against patriots of the United States. That is way, and the
Yep.
surprising thing, it
Right.
was ready to go. Like I still remember that it took less than a week for the Patriot Act to be fully written and proposed into Congress. It was definitely ready to go before 9/11 even happened. And now we
Right.
have the end result, which is like 1.3 million Iraqis and through the Middle East were dead. It was a war provocation that was obviously pre-planned. You had guys like you who were uncovering it and saying, listen, this stuff is going to happen. And then when it happened, these were the guys who were involved, at least in some aspect. You have all the information, and then the cover-up got worse. I have to ask this question, and you can
Yeah.
feel free to say shut up, Eric, and don't answer this question. The Pentagon never found any remnant of a plane, from the best of my understanding. Was it a
So
plane?
I have friends who said they were on the road on the highway next to the Pentagon who heard the plane coming in. So I've got to go with what they said, and,
Sure.
and one of them I trust because she was a courier, and we have couriers just like the movies, where we move things around that are we don't want electronic footprints on. One of the couriers who I trust said she heard the airplane coming in over her head. So, and then
Fair enough.
I've had other friends who responded that day to whatever hit the Pentagon going in, to include my friend Don Rumsfeld. Don Rumsfeld turned around and was actually one of my supporters in the end, even though at the time he was lied to about what we were doing as Able Danger. So
Hmm.
there was some
Even
interesting
Rumsfeld,
change.
huh?
Yeah, yeah.
And how do buildings that are attacked from the side fall straight down? That's another question. I mean, like I'm not going to get too deep into
Yeah,
it,
I
but
don't
these are
know. That's Eric, I've tried to stick to what I know directly is my primary focus. So,
I
I
understand and
could go
respect
through
that.
chapter and verse what I did and what I know.
I
Stuff like
understand and
that,
respect that.
yeah.
But this is, geez, Colonel, this has been. I mean, there rarely do I meet people who blow me away because I kind of dig deep into everything. But hearing the inside track of a cover up for something that happened 2 years after the announcement of saying, "Hey, here's the danger, guys." A very well named operation, by the way, Able Danger. There is Able Danger in existence, and it's going to happen in less than 3 years. No one did anything, and as soon as it happened, you're sitting here saying, hey, guys, this is what we told you. This is all the reports. And then they just shut it down from the inside. I think the
Yeah.
most encouraging thing that I've heard you say, number one, is that you're working with what capacity are you working with President Trump in?
I've not worked with President Trump right now at all. I was the national security advisor to the Trump 2020 campaign.
The
And
campaign.
yeah, yeah. And so I still, obviously, I'm friendly with the team. I've maintained contact with them and everything. But I'm an elected official down here in North Carolina. I'm happily serving as a county commissioner right now. So,
That is fantastic. But do you think you're going to get called in? I think that, just the Tucker episode, I think kickstarted the 9/11 back into people's minds because they've really done everything in media to get it out. Do you think that we'll see any, like that you will be called into Congress again to relive this and get to the truth at some point?
So I know that there's been discussion about a role that I should do in a new investigation. Um, I am happy to jump in or not jump in. Look, I'm retired. I actually, despite all the, I've got a beautiful house. I, get to talk to people like you on a routine basis, which I enjoy. I work for Newsmax. I produce TV. I I'm happy. So I'm happy, but also I understand that I have an oath of office that I'm happy to support as
Yes.
well. So if I'm asked to help, I'm ready to jump in. Uh, and I think there's things that need to be resolved, and I'm happy to help resolve those things. I'm just not sure, Eric, if they'd like how direct I would be in going after these things, because I would not hold back and going and looking at some of these things, to include encouraging criminal investigations of certain folks, which I think were criminally liable for some of the failures. So,
Well, I will take the courage of speaking for 330 million Americans that we would love to hear you be direct. We don't care what the outcome is. I don't care. At the end of the day, I don't care who did it. I want to know who did it. It doesn't matter who it
yep,
is in the end. We need to understand who was involved in the attack, who allowed the attack, who covered up the attack, and who profited from all of this. Like that is a big thing, right? Like we all need to understand who Larry Silverman is, and that's just a very strange coincidence that we've all been told is just a happy coincidence for this guy. Who That's the question I think we all have, Colonel, is like, do you think, and this is just an opinion, I'm not asking you as an intelligence person, do you as an individual believe that at some point in the future we will have full disclosure of 9/11?
Well, yeah, let me answer that by a comment. And why would you have, kind of to put it in the way you ask questions, why would you have an elite team of special operations professionals, everything from units you've heard about in the news, Delta, and other units being prepared to act? Why would you spin these things up and prepare for action before 9/11 just to have it stood down? Why would you do that? And I would argue that there were forces within our government who wanted us to stop these guys. We went
Sure.
we went full bore after these guys. And our job, my job, was then, as it is now, to protect the American people. Period. That's what I signed up to do. And so we did that. That was our job. And somehow then be told to first off stopped, and then be forced to witness what happened, to witness a failure that we feel could have been prevented by the fact we were designed to prevent the failure. Think about that.
Yes.
We were designed to prevent the failure that we were forced to witness. So the answer is, I think that there is a need to have a reckoning, and I think if people like me, people like Kurt Weldon, are permitted to work with Tulsi Gabbard and the Pentagon and some others, we'll get to the bottom of this. But people may not like where it goes, but we need to get to the bottom of it no matter what.
I couldn't agree more. I could not agree more. And we are 10 minutes over time. Colonel, this has been amazing. I'd love to have you back on. I've got so many other conversations that I'd love to have with you, but 9/11, 2001 seems like a million years ago to so many people. It seems like yesterday. I can remember that morning like it was yesterday. I'm sure most people my age can. But there's such a depth of knowledge. I hope we get a chance to have dinner too. I hope we can get you down to Texas.
Oh, I'd love to do that. Sure.
And have some dinner. But yes, this has been amazing. Once again, show your book. You've shown it a few times, but we'll do that.
Yeah,
I'll put a link into it. I ordered it. So just to let you guys know, I ordered it. I have not read it. I am absolutely waiting for it. So those of you watching this, order that book online. This is going to be fascinating. I did not know before this interview. I've never met Colonel Schaefer before this interview today. I didn't know you were a spy. I think that is probably the coolest thing. Is
like I said,
disclosure.
people tend to forget. People tend to forget. It's like, yeah, it's like that's how I all started off. So, but it's like I said, I love being a spy. I was in career cover and everything else. It was great. So,
Well, I am anxiously awaiting the day they call you back into service to disclose this, or at least get into the investigation side. And I actually 100% believe that if anyone's ever going to do that, it's going to be Donald Trump. I think he is the one man with enough bravery.
He's the one man
to open the book.
Yeah.
Well, God bless you, sir.
Thanks,
this has been amazing, and best of luck to you and your family. Are you on social media? How can people find you?
I am.
Follow you.
T-Spooky. I'm T-Spooky on Twitter, and Tony Shaffer, Anthony Shaffer on Facebook. I try to post stuff on both things, mostly on X. So Tony Shaffer or T-Spooky, they'll figure it out.
If they don't, you'll find them and help them figure it out, because that's what you do.
Yeah.
This is awesome. Thank you so much, Colonel. God bless you. God bless your family. Great luck with the new career. God bless the state of North Carolina. You guys need those prayers. Recovery's on the way. You guys are doing great. And all of our hearts and all of our prayers are with you. So thank you so much, sir.